Welcome to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fish and Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome back to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. Bit of a slow week this week as we gear up for the spring bear and wild turkey season. You know, if you haven't already, now might be a good time to go pattern that shotgun and get it ready for old Tom Turkey. In light of the gobbler season, and with this week's episode hitting the streets on the 10th, I thought maybe we'd change up the rapid fire bulletin to a 410 this week for shoots and giggles. Like I said, not a whole lot to go over this week. We got a deadline for Commission Community Challenge grants fast approaching. Some things y'all need to know about the Boise River WMA before you dust off those hiking boots. And speaking of bears, a story on how to avoid conflicts with them as they rub the crusties out of their eyes and crawl out of their beds. But first, hold on to your pot calls. We're hitting the public lands in search of turkeys. Idaho hunters are blessed with about 2/3 of the state being publicly owned, and hundreds of thousands more acres are open for public hunting. That provides great opportunities for turkey hunters because lots of birds are found on public land where anyone can hunt them. But be prepared for and embrace the challenges when you hunt these birds on their own turf. In some places, turkeys are year-round residents in a relatively small area. This is pretty common when they inhabit private agriculture lands, and if you have permission to hunt those birds, you're likely in for a fun hunt. But hunters can also find turkeys in many national forests, BLM land, Fish and Game's WMAs, state endowment lands, and other properties where Fish and Game has secured access for hunters. Combined, there are millions of acres in Idaho to pursue turkeys. However, these birds can pose different challenges than birds that reside year-round in one location. Wildland turkeys can be widely dispersed and mobile, as well as cagey and challenging to pattern. A savvy public lands hunter may want to mimic the tactics of big game hunters by hiking off the beaten path to scout and locate flocks, and plan to spend plenty of time in the woods and fields pursuing them. When you're scouting, the easiest way to locate birds is usually with your ears. Male turkeys have an almost irresistible urge to shot gobble when they hear certain noises, and there are many calls available to trigger a shot gobble, including hen calls, dropping your tailgate, slamming your door, and locking your keys in the truck. Getting a tom turkey to gobble can help you locate flocks from a distance and in areas where they're not easily visible. Another option is finding a vantage point where you can view a lot of country and use binoculars or a spotting scope to locate flocks. While turkeys in a green pasture can be conspicuous, they blend surprisingly well into timbered or brushy terrain. When scouting, remember that in many parts of Idaho, turkeys may not stick around where you spotted them in early spring. Turkeys typically follow the snow line up in elevation as it melts and green forage becomes available. So if you scout too early, the birds may be gone when the season opens in mid-April. And where you found them in early or mid-April, they may have moved on by May. You can also hike in the woods and look for signs such as tracks, feathers, and scat. Dirt roads, especially those that are gated, can be good places to find turkey sign in the spring and give you a clue where turkeys are feeding or passing through. Recently scratched up dirt can show you where they've been feeding, lingering, and taking dust baths. Turkeys tend to like areas that are a mix of trees, brush, meadows, and grassy slopes. Logged or recently thinned areas are often magnets for turkeys because they provide a good combination of open terrain and mixed vegetation. Always be on the lookout for a roost tree, which can be the mother lode of turkey hunting because the flock will often return daily to that roost site unless they're disturbed. Turkeys will often have a daily routine where they roost, feed, wander, and return. They tend to be most active and vocal early and late in the day. If you understand their patterns, you can pinpoint an area to hunt them. But as I mentioned earlier, turkeys also have seasonal movements, typically moving up in elevation during the spring, similar to deer and elk as they search for fresh forage. That migration may be slow and steady, so you may have a chance to locate flocks again where you first spotted them, or nearby, but a little higher in elevation. Turkeys tend to return to the same general areas each spring, so you may find them again the following year if the snow is melted and weather conditions are similar. Now, switching from scouting to hunting. The two are essentially the same, with the obvious difference being you're trying to get close enough to take a shot when you're hunting. Here are a few things to keep in mind when hunting public land or publicly accessible land. First, you probably aren't going to be alone out there. Making turkey sounds may attract other hunters, and don't be surprised if you also get fooled by the calls of someone else. After all, you're both trying to mimic a real turkey. Also, be aware that other hunters may have turkey decoys out, so if you spot a turkey, make sure it's a live bird. If you realize you're in another hunter's territory, move to another spot. If someone unknowingly comes into an area that you're hunting, safely get their attention by waving or calling out if necessary. It may spook a flock, but no turkey is worth a hunting accident. Competition between hunters can be frustrating, but be a good sport about it. The other person worked just as hard to locate the birds as you did. These situations can usually be resolved amicably by just talking to the other hunter. If you want to avoid other hunters, get as far away from roads and trails as you can. You can also opt to hunt later in the day because many turkey hunters focus on mornings and are out of the woods by late morning or early afternoon. Remember that toms will gobble throughout the day. They just tend to be more vocal early in the morning and in the evenings. Also, consider hunting later in the season. Most spring general hunts last until May 25th, but many hunters focus their efforts on the first couple weeks of the season. Spring breeding season lasts well into May, so you may have the opportunity to call in a tom throughout the season. Turkey hunting can be a heck of a good time, especially when you locate, call in, and shoot a tom. But it can also be frustrating when you have to get up early, hike for hours, and you never see a bird. Trust me, that is why I switched to bear and shed hunting in spring. But if you're seeing fresh sign or hearing birds in the distance, you know they're out there. If you're persistent, it's probably a matter of time until you cross paths with them, and that's when things get fun. You have to accept that there's a lot of country where they could be hanging out, and it's up to you to find them. That makes the feeling of success so much more rewarding, and what you learn one season is experience you will carry over into the next season. So embrace that challenge and appreciate that you're pursuing a great game bird in some of Idaho's most beautiful wild country. So with that said, best of luck out there this spring. Hit the link below to read Roger Phillips' story on our website. All right, while we're on the topic of public lands, let's pop on down to the Boise River WMA. The portion of the Boise Front segment of the Boise River Wildlife Management Area west of Highway 21 reopened to the public on April 1st, following a months-long closure aimed at benefiting wintering big game and accommodating rehabilitation efforts after the Valley Fire. Here's Regional Habitat Manager Brad Lowe.
Unfortunately, we had to close several trails shortly after reopening due to public safety concerns associated with Idaho power crews running heavy equipment to work on the power line that runs from the West Highland Valley trailhead up to the archery range, then along Highland Valley Road to the Highway 21.
Idaho power crews will continue to work on roads leading to power lines beginning May 1st, when they intend to complete the replacement of cross arms. That will necessitate lots of Idaho Power staff activity in the area, again, making recreational use of that area unsafe. Though weather may alter plans, it is expected that all roads and trails, as well as the archery range, will be open on May 3rd. Closed roads and trails include Cobb Trail, West Highland Valley Road, East Highland Valley Road, and East Shaw Mountain Road. And one last thing to think about before you go. While deer and elk will soon begin their migration from the Boise Front back up to their summer ranges, many are still on the WMA, and they are particularly vulnerable in the early spring. By now, they've burned through most of the fat stores that carry them through the winter, and in some circumstances, additional stress at this time of year could prove fatal. And even though it has been a relatively mild winter in this part of the state, winter mortality has been high this year for collared mule deer fawns in Unit 39. As of March 31st, 58% of collared fawns had died, with 2 months still to go in the monitoring period. This rate of mortality was about 20% higher than what is normally observed for Unit 39 at this point in the monitoring season. While impacts from fires likely contributed to the higher mortality this year, the most important factor is that fawns showed up on winter range light in the first place, which means they had fewer groceries on their backs going in. Here's regional wildlife biologist David Bernasconi on what we mean by groceries.
Our fawns average 69 pounds in weight at the beginning of the season, and from what we know about winter survival, fawns that weigh approximately 65 pounds or less have a highly elevated risk of not surviving the winter. We were fairly close to that threshold at the beginning of this winter.
So for folks who are eager to recreate on the WMA now that the closure has been lifted, what does all that mean? Well, maybe consider holding off for a couple more weeks to continue to give these animals a break. And at the very least, do your best to minimize impacts to big game on the WMA property. So leash your dogs and give deer and elk a wide berth. For more on this story, go check out Brian Pearson's article on our website, link in the description. All right, moving on to groggy bear news. Spring is a critical time for bears as they emerge from hibernation and search for food. Natural food sources can be scarce early in the season, making unsecured garbage, pet food, bird feeders, and other human-related attractants a significant temptation. If a bear becomes accustomed to unnatural food, it can lead to conflicts between bears and humans. Fish and Game recommends the following steps to avoid conflicts between bears and humans. If you're living in bear country, make sure you secure garbage in bear-resistant containers or store it indoors or in a hard-sided locked building until the morning of pickup. Remove bird feeders completely or only use them when bears are hibernating, likely November through March. Store pet food and livestock feed inside or in a hard-sided locked building and be sure to clean up any spilled food. Keep barbecues clean and store them in a secure location, and protect livestock, beehives, fruit trees, and compost with electric fencing. Now, if you're camping, keep food and anything with a scent out of your tents. Dispose of garbage in provided containers, otherwise take it with you and dispose of it properly elsewhere. Do not bury or burn garbage. Food storage options include bear boxes or hard-sided vehicles. Just make sure you avoid leaving attractants in vehicles for extended periods, like if you're going on a backcountry trip. Certified bear-resistant containers also work, as well as electric fencing, depending on local regulations and model or configuration of the fence. And if you're just hiking through bear country, carry bear spray and, for the love of God, know how to use it. You should also hike in groups of 3 or more. Avoid hiking after dark or at dawn or dusk when bears are most active, not attractive. Use extra caution in places where visibility or hearing is limited, such as bushy areas near streams. Also be alert. Watch for fresh tracks, scat, and feeding sites, such as signs of digging, rolled rocks, torn up logs, or ripped open anthills. You should also consider making noise. And no, that ain't a free pass to hike around with your Bluetooth speaker blasting Sturgill Simpson. When hiking, periodically yell, "Hey bear," or "Yo bear," or any other variation of a greeting to alert bears of your presence, especially when walking through dense vegetation or blind spots, traveling upwind, near loud streams, or on windy days. Avoid thick brush whenever possible. Bears often use the same trails hikers do and are attracted to sources of food like berry patches or carcasses. Lastly, only view and photograph wildlife from a distance. You should never, ever come closer than 100 yards to a bear. Here's Upper Snake Regional Communications Manager and half-man, half-bear himself, James Brower.
Using these bear-aware principles and being proactive in securing food sources is vital to preventing conflicts with bears. A few simple actions will go a long way to help keep both people and bears safe this spring.
For more information on living and recreating in bear country, check out James's press release or contact your local Fish and Game office. Hit the link below if you want to learn more. All right, that's all the major stories for this week. Let's hit the rapid-fire bulletin. The deadline to submit applications for the Fish and Game Commission's Community Challenge Grants program is April 15th. Grants provide competitive funding for officially recognized nonprofit organizations to implement projects that are broadly supported by the local sporting community and enhance fish and wildlife habitat, populations, or associated recreational opportunities. If you're a nonprofit, business, or recognized sporting organization and want to apply, hit the link in the show notes and get on it. Up in the Panhandle, Idaho Fish and Game, in partnership with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, is conducting an angler survey, also known as a creel survey, on Coeur d'Alene Lake and its chain lakes this year. Fish and Game technicians on the northern half of the lake and tribal technicians on the southern half will be conducting short interviews with anglers at boat ramps as they are ending their day of fishing. Future decisions related to managing the many fisheries in Coeur d'Alene Lake are only as good as the information Fish and Game uses to make them. Fish and Game, in partnership with anglers, can generate useful information to maintain or improve local fisheries. And last but not least, a reminder for you Kootenai River burbot anglers to turn in your Angler Science program packets by April 15th, which is coming up. If you are one of the many anglers who participated in the 2025 Kootenai River Angler Science program, Thank you so much for investing time and energy into this program. Information collected by all of you will help Idaho Fish and Game manage the burbot fishery in the Kootenai River. Hit the link below to learn more. Okay, that's it for this week's stories. It's time for the question of the week. So I came across this question in one of my Idaho hunting and fishing online groups and wanted to maybe shed a little light on it in the Hook and Bulletin. The user asked, how does the lifetime hunting license work? Say I buy one for me and my son, and then we move out of state. Are we able to buy over-the-counter resident tags at that point? Shout out to our licensing guru, Tara Reichert, for her help on this one. So yeah, if you got a lifetime hunting license, you'd maintain resident privileges in terms of tag availability and controlled hunts, but you would have to pay non-resident prices. So yes, if you move out of state, you can still buy over-the-counter resident tags, just at a non-resident fee. Hope this helps. That's all the news we have for this week, folks. Thanks for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin. If there's something on your mind, or if you got a question related to Fish and Game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. And I check that email every single morning, sometimes before I even have a cup of coffee. We have a ton of incredible people working here who know 100 times more than me about pretty much anything. And if there's something you think would be a cool topic to dive into, shoot us a note. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.